What if everything you thought you knew about human history was built on a foundation of assumptions? What if the textbooks, the documentaries, the confident proclamations about when our species first walked this earth were all missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Tonight, on Stone Age Stories, we take you on a journey that challenges the very timeline of humanity itself. A discovery so bold, so disruptive, that it forces scientists, historians, and everyday people like you and me to stop and ask, have we been wrong all along? For decades, school books and university lectures told a simple story. Humanity, in its modern form, Homo sapiens, emerged roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago in Africa. From there, our ancestors spread across the globe, inventing tools, creating art, and building the foundations of what would one day become civilization. It was a neat timeline, clean, easy to digest, a comforting line drawn through history, reassuring us that we knew where we came from and when. But beneath the surface of that certainty, cracks were already forming. Archaeologists digging into caves, deserts, and forgotten riverbeds began unearthing pieces of evidence that didn't quite fit the puzzle. Fossils that looked too old, tools that seemed too advanced, and whispers of human presence reaching back far earlier than science dared to admit. And then came a discovery so staggering that it shook the entire field. Evidence that our species might not be 200,000 years old at all. Imagine that. 1,000,000 years of untold stories, 1,000,000 years of survival, struggle, love, firelight, and fear. 1,000,000 years erased by the tidy lines of modern science. As we step into this journey together, let me be clear, this is not just a story about bones and stones. It is a story about us, about who we are, where we come from, and the echoes of those who lived before us. And tonight, in part 1, we will peel back the layers of time, walking alongside the shadowy figures of our earliest ancestors, and confronting the evidence that challenges the very roots of human history, the cracks in the timeline. To understand why this discovery is so explosive, we must first look at how fragile the accepted timeline has always been. The truth is, our knowledge of early humans has never been as firm as the textbooks pretend. Much of it has been based on fragmentary evidence. A jawbone here, a tooth there, a few scattered stone tools buried in layers of earth. Each piece is precious, but incomplete. And from these fragments, scientists constructed grand timelines as if trying to solve a 1,000-piece puzzle with only a dozen pieces in hand. The danger, of course, is that when new pieces are found, pieces that don't fit the neat picture we've created, the entire puzzle must be reconsidered. And that is exactly what began to happen. In caves across Africa, archaeologists uncovered stone tools so old that they predated the official appearance of modern humans by hundreds of thousands of years. In the Middle East, skull fragments suggested that human-like beings were living and thriving long before they were supposed to exist. In Europe and Asia, traces of ancient hearths revealed controlled use of fire long before the official timeline allowed for it. The evidence was mounting, but most of it was quietly brushed aside. Mainstream science wasn't ready to rewrite the story. Not yet. The discovery that could not be ignored, and then came the find. Deep within a rocky outcrop, far from the noise of modern cities, researchers uncovered a fossilized fragment, not just of an ancient being, but of something undeniably human. It was not alone. Around it lay tools shaped with deliberate precision. Tools meant for cutting, scraping, hunting. Nearby were signs of controlled fire, blackened patches of earth where flames had once burned bright against the night. At first, the team assumed it was old, but not too old, perhaps 300,000 years, 1,000,000 years ago. And yet here were tools, here was fire. Here was evidence of hands like ours, minds like ours, shaping the world. The implications were staggering. If these were truly modern humans, our kind, then everything we thought we knew about our origins was wrong. We were not a young species. We were ancient, far, far older than we dared imagine. The human face of the distant past. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine life 1,000,000 years ago. The world was both familiar and alien. Rivers carved valleys much as they do today. Herds of animals roamed plains and forests. But predators lurked everywhere. Lions larger than modern ones, saber-toothed cats with fangs like daggers, packs of hyenas that could strip flesh from bone in minutes. And in this harsh, unforgiving world, a small group of humans huddled together. By the glow of firelight, their faces flickered with fear and determination. Their children clung to them, their hands dirty from foraging roots and berries. Beside them lay tools of stone, sharp, practical, life-saving. These were not almost humans. They were not a different species altogether. These were us, our people, Homo sapiens, surviving against impossible odds nearly 1,000,000 years ago. Science in turmoil. When news of the find broke, the scientific community was divided. Some hailed it as the discovery of the century. Others dismissed it outright, unwilling to entertain the possibility that humans were so ancient. Entire careers had been built on the established timeline. Textbooks printed by the millions would have to be rewritten. Museums would need to change their exhibits. University lectures would need to be corrected. And so, resistance rose like a wall. Skeptics demanded more evidence. Was the dating wrong? Could the fossils have been contaminated? Were the tools really made by humans? Or perhaps by another species altogether? The debates raged in conferences, in journals, and in the media. But one thing was undeniable. The discovery had lit a fire that could not be put out. The questions that haunt us: if humanity is truly 1,000,000 years old, what does that mean for our story? How many civilizations, however small, may have risen and fallen in that vast stretch of time? How many tales of love, survival, and courage have been lost to the winds of history? Because if modern humans existed nearly 1,000,000 years ago, then the story of who we are must be rewritten from the ground up. Join us in the next episode of Stone Age Stories as we continue this journey tracing the footsteps of our forgotten ancestors, confronting the mysteries of their tools, their survival, and the echoes they left behind. The past is calling. Will you listen? Previously, on Stone Age Stories, a discovery shook the foundations of human history, evidence suggesting that modern humans, Homo sapiens, may have walked the earth not 200,000 years ago, not 300,000, but nearly 1,000,000 years ago. A claim so bold, so world-altering that science itself seemed to stagger under its weight. But what happens when a truth so ancient collides with the comfortable certainties of modern knowledge? What happens when a fossilized bone and a charred piece of earth demand that we tear up the pages of our textbooks? Tonight, we step into the heart of that conflict. This is not only a story of discovery, but of resistance, of denial, and of the stubborn courage of evidence itself. The shock waves in science: when the dating results first emerged, the room fell silent. The archaeologists gathered around the table could hardly believe their eyes. 1,000,000 years. The number was almost unthinkable. For some it was thrilling, for others terrifying. Because in science, new evidence isn't just a discovery, it's a challenge, a threat to careers, reputations, and the fragile balance of accepted truth. Within weeks, the find made its way into academic journals and conferences. Some researchers hailed it as revolutionary, while others were quick to strike it down. Impossible, critics argued. The dating must be wrong. Contamination, others said. The sediments must have shifted, mixing younger and older layers, and the harshest skeptics declared, even if the fossils are that old, they cannot belong to modern humans. They must belong to some other species. Perhaps Homo erectus, perhaps something else. But not us. But the evidence refused to bow. The layers of earth told their story. The isotopes whispered their ancient truth. And the tools, sharp, deliberate, unmistakably crafted, seemed to carry the fingerprints of hands like ours. A silent war. The battle did not unfold on television screens or in the public eye. It took place in lecture halls, in quiet corners of museums, in the guarded language of scientific papers. But beneath the surface, the war was fierce. On one side stood those who believed the evidence was undeniable. They saw in these fossils the proof that humanity's story was older, deeper, and more complex than we ever dared imagine. On the other side were those who feared the implications. For them, it was not just about bones and stones, it was about trust. How could they admit to the world that science had been wrong, not by a century, not by a millennium, but by hundreds of thousands of years? To rewrite the human story would mean admitting ignorance. It would mean humbling ourselves before the vastness of time, and many were not ready for that. The forgotten ancestors. But beyond the debates and the arguments, there remains a deeper question. Who were these people? Imagine them, 1,000,000 years ago. They lived in small bands, no larger than a few dozen souls. They moved with the seasons, following the herds, seeking water, always alert to danger. Their shelters were simple: caves when they could find them, lean-tos of branches and leaves when they could not. At night, they gathered around fire. Fire was more than warmth. It was protection from predators, a circle of light against the endless dark. It was a place where stories may have been told, though not in words as we know them. Perhaps in gestures, in grunts, in the rhythm of shared experience. Children played in the dirt, chasing each other with laughter that sounded just like ours. Parents taught them to shape stone, to recognize edible plants, to fear the gleam of eyes watching from the brush. Their days were a cycle of danger and survival, but also of love, care, and the fragile hope of tomorrow. They were not so different from us. Their hearts beat with the same rhythm, their eyes looked to the same stars, and though we cannot know their names, their blood still runs in our veins. The tools of 1,000,000 years. Archaeologists studying the site uncovered more than bones. They found tools: chipped stones with edges sharpened by deliberate strikes, scrapers for cleaning hides, blades for cutting meat, heavy hand axes that could split bone to reach the marrow inside. Each tool was a whisper across the ages. We were here, we survived, we shaped the world with our hands. And yet, these tools were not crude. They showed planning, skill, even artistry. They were not the work of a mindless creature. They were the signature of intelligence, of foresight, of beings who could look at a stone and see not what it was, but what it could become. One can almost picture it, a human squatting by the fire, striking stone against stone, sparks flying into the night, children watching, learning, their small fingers tracing the edges of the finished blade, 1,000,000 years ago, and yet the scene feels so familiar. The skeptics' last standstill. The debates raged. Scientists who clung to the old timeline fought desperately to reinterpret the evidence. Yes, the tools are old, they admit it, but they were made by a different species. Yes, the bones are human-like, but perhaps they are not quite modern. But every attempt to explain away the evidence only deepened the mystery. Because if these were not modern humans, then who were they? What kind of beings shaped these tools, tamed fire, and walked upright with faces so much like our own? And if they were a different species, then why did they look so much like us? Why did they behave so much like us? Could it be that the distinction between us and them is far blurrier than we ever believed? The weight of time, 1,000,000 years. The number itself is almost beyond comprehension. We measure our lives in decades, our histories in centuries, our civilizations in millennia. But 1,000,000 years, that is a vast ocean of time. In that span, entire landscapes have risen and crumbled. Rivers have shifted their courses, ice ages have come and gone, and through it all, our ancestors endured. They may not have built cities or carved monuments, but they built something far greater, the unbroken chain of survival that led, eventually, to us. Every breath we take is a gift from them, every heartbeat an echo of their struggle, or to retort, the anon. And so, Part 2 of our journey comes to a close. The debates continue, the evidence refuses to fade, and the faces of our forgotten ancestors look back at us from the depths of 1,000,000 years. But the greatest mystery still lies ahead, because if humans lived 1,000,000 years ago, then where did they go? What happened to their world? Did they vanish without a trace? Or did they leave behind more clues, hidden in caves, buried beneath deserts, waiting for us to uncover? In the next episode of Stone Age Stories, we follow the trail deeper. We explore the rise and fall of these ancient humans, the predators they faced, the lands they crossed, and the possibility that their legacy still lingers within us today. This is not just science, it is the story of us all. What if the entire story of our species is not only older than we thought, but also far more dramatic, far more precarious, and far more miraculous than the textbooks ever dared to imagine? In parts 1 and 2 of this series, we pulled back the curtain on discoveries that stretched the human timeline back toward 1,000,000 years. We examined fossils misidentified for decades, genetic evidence that rewrote entire chapters of human history, and the fragile, fragmentary record that hides more than it reveals. But here, in Part 3, we move forward. We begin tracing the unfolding story of humanity across the ages, following the trail of firelight through the dark corridors of prehistory and asking, what was it actually like to live in those distant epochs when our species hovered on the edge of extinction, and yet, somehow, endured? You are watching Stone Age Stories, and this is where the journey deepens. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world as it was nearly 3/4 of a million years ago. The land was raw and restless, shifting under the great ice ages that rose and receded like tides of frozen time. Across Africa, Europe, and Asia, vast plains opened beneath endless skies. Herds of elephants and antelopes thundered over savannas. Predators stalked the edges of every clearing. Into this landscape walked beings who were both familiar and alien creatures with minds approaching our own. Hands capable of shaping tools from stone, eyes that could look into a fire and see more than warmth. They could see possibility. The mastery of fire stands as one of the greatest turning points in our evolutionary journey. By the time we reach 500,000 years ago, scattered populations of archaic humans were learning to tame flames carried from natural wildfires. At first they used fire as a weapon against predators, as light in the night, and as warmth against the chill of encroaching ice. But over time, fire became more than survival, it became culture. Imagine the glow of flames reflecting on the faces of small family bands, the sparks drifting into the dark as children listened to the first stories told, not in words as we know them, but in gestures, grunts, and half-formed language. Around fire we became more than animals, we became communities. Archaeological sites across Africa and Europe confirm this shift. Layers of ash, charred bones, and burned stone tools testify that by 400,000 years ago, humans were not just using fire, but mastering it. In caves like Wonderwork in South Africa, blackened sediments show fires tended intentionally by human hands almost 1,000,000 years ago. These were not accidents, they were deliberate acts of control, moments where nature's fury was bent to human will. With fire, we cooked food, unlocking more nutrition from meat and plants, fueling larger brains. With fire, we drove away beasts in the night. With fire, we carved out an island of safety in a world that wanted us gone. And yet, survival was never guaranteed. The timeline of our ancestors is marked by near misses, close calls, population crashes that almost erased us. Genetic studies suggest that around 800,000 years ago, humanity's ancestors dwindled to fewer than 1,500 breeding individuals. Imagine that, our entire lineage balanced on the razor's edge of extinction. A single drought, a single epidemic, or a predator surge could have snuffed us out forever. But instead, those few survivors carried the flame forward literally and figuratively through the dark corridors of time. As we step further along the timeline, evidence of stone tools reveals the growing sophistication of these early humans. Hand axes, flakes, and spear points litter sites across Africa and Europe, mute witnesses to countless hunts, butchered carcasses, and struggles against both prey and predator. With these tools, our ancestors brought down game larger than themselves, sometimes uniting in coordinated hunts that required planning, cooperation, and trust. Each sharpened edge was not just stone, but a symbol of ingenuity and idea carved into rock. Picture a group of hunters moving silently through tall grass, stone-tipped spears gripped tightly in their hands. Ahead, a massive animal, perhaps a straight-tusked elephant or a woolly rhinoceros, grazes unsuspectingly. Hearts pound. Signals are exchanged with the eyes, the tilt of a head, the flick of a hand. Then, the charge. Shouts erupt. Spears fly. Chaos explodes. Some hunters may die, trampled or gored, but if they succeed, the reward is immense. Food to feed the band for days. Bones to shape into tools. Hides to wear as protection. These were not random acts of violence. They were survival strategies, proof that our ancestors could imagine a future and act together to secure it. Meanwhile, the earth itself was shaping the course of human history. Glacial cycles rose and fell like breaths of stone and ice. When the glaciers advanced, habitats shrank. When they retreated, new corridors opened across continents. Humans followed rivers and coastlines, pushing into new lands. By 600,000 years ago, human footprints stretched across Africa and into Eurasia. Sites in Spain, Italy, and beyond preserve the bones of early Europeans, sometimes showing signs of cannibalism, a grim reminder that survival often meant desperate choices. It is within this span between 600,000 and 400,000 years ago that we see the emergence of beings so close to us in mind and body that to look into their eyes would feel uncanny. Fossils from Bodo in Ethiopia, dating to around 640,000 years ago, show skulls massive yet distinctly human, brains swelling toward modern proportions. These individuals, classified by some as Homo heidelbergensis, by others as archaic Homo sapiens, represent a critical bridge in our story. They were not quite us, not yet, but they were on the path. Genetic evidence whispers the same truth. By 500,000 years ago, the branches of the human family tree were diverging clearly. One branch was heading toward Neanderthals, another toward Denisovans, and still another the one that would become Uswas, consolidating its identity. These were not simple, linear progressions. Populations split, mixed, vanished, and re-emerged in a dance as complex as the shifting ice sheets above them. Yet through it all, a thread of continuity remained. The slow, stubborn march toward modern humanity. What did life look like for these ancestors as they navigated this shifting world? Imagine waking each day with no guarantee of survival. Predators lurked everywhere: saber-toothed cats, hyenas the size of bears, lions with bones stronger than steel. Storms could drown you, droughts could starve you, and rival humans could kill you for resources. And yet, in the evenings, families gathered, they shared food, they laughed, in whatever way laughter sounded then. They cared for their young, buried their dead, and perhaps, just perhaps, dreamed of something greater than the hunt. The fossil record offers haunting glimpses into these moments. Skeletons show healed fractures, proof that injured individuals were cared for by their groups. Skulls bear cut marks, hinting at rituals or acts of desperation. In the charred remains of hearths, we see continuity, fire after fire after fire, tended carefully across centuries. These people were not brutes. They were survivors. They were inventors. They were the architects of everything we are today. By 400,000 years ago, the first wooden spears appear in the archaeological record. At Scheveningen in Germany, 8 carefully crafted spears were found preserved in the mud, alongside butchered horse remains. These weapons, perfectly balanced, reveal a sophistication of design far beyond mere instinct. They speak of foresight, of testing, of teaching, the passing down of knowledge from one generation to the next. When you hold one in your imagination, you hold a piece of genius, and still, the great mystery persists. The fossils, the tools, the DNA, all whisper the same message. Our lineage is far older than we ever dared believe. But where are the bones that prove it? Where are the skulls of Homo sapiens stretching back 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 years? Perhaps they wait, buried beneath the soil of Africa, lost in caves yet undiscovered, or dissolved entirely by the relentless passage of time. The absence is not proof of non-existence. It is only a reminder of how fragile our past is, how easily it can be erased. As we close this chapter of the journey, pause for a moment and reflect on what it means. The humans of 500,000 years ago were not strangers. They were us, in embryo, carrying the seeds of everything to come: art, music, language, civilization. Their struggles were our struggles. Their triumphs, our triumphs, and though their bones are scarce, their fire still burns in every heartbeat, every breath, every story we tell. This has been Stone Age Stories. And yet, our exploration is only half begun. In the next chapter we will step closer still into the age when modern humanity began to take unmistakable form, when Neanderthals rose alongside us, and when the stage was set for the greatest encounter in all of human history, the meeting of kindred species, and the moment when our destiny truly began. Dim the lights, let the fire crackle, for the past is not finished with us yet. What if the world you were born into was already filled with beings so much like you, yet not quite the same? What if, for hundreds of thousands of years, humanity was not alone on Earth, but just one of several branches walking the same forests, hunting the same prey, and gazing at the same stars? This is the forgotten reality of our deep past, a time when our species was only beginning to take form, and we shared the planet with others equally human, equally extraordinary. You are watching Stone Age Stories, and in Part 4, we step into the shadowed age between 300,000 and 100,000 years ago, an age of encounters, innovations, and the slow, relentless forging of modern humanity. The story begins in Africa, the cradle of our kind. By 300,000 years ago, something remarkable had taken shape. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco show faces startlingly familiar: flat cheeks, delicate brow ridges, rounded skulls. These are not quite modern humans, not yet, but they are us in the making. They are Homo sapiens at the dawn of their existence. Imagine their lives. Families gathered in rocky shelters overlooking vast savannas. Children played with stones and sticks, imitating their parents' movements. Hunters carried spears tipped with fire-hardened points. Women and men worked side by side to prepare hides, scrape bones, and keep fire alive through cold nights. These were not creatures of instinct alone. They were thinkers. They planned hunts, shared knowledge, and passed down skills. Their brains, fully modern in size, were engines of imagination waiting to ignite. But across the wider world, our kind was not alone. In Europe and Western Asia, Neanderthals flourished. Stocky, powerful, adapted to cold climates, Neanderthals were master toolmakers and hunters. Far from brutish cavemen, they lived in complex groups, cared for their sick, and may have adorned themselves with feathers, pigments, and ornaments. Their voices carried through icy valleys, their eyes reflecting the firelight just as ours did. Farther east, another lineage thrived, the Denisovans. Only a handful of bones and teeth, discovered in Siberia's Denisova cave, tell us of their existence. Yet their genetic legacy lives on, scattered in the DNA of people from Asia and Oceania. They were real, they were powerful, and they were kin. For over 200,000 years, these branches coexisted. The Earth was a crowded stage of humanity, each group adapting to its environment, each carving out a place in the world. Sometimes they clashed, sometimes they mingled, and sometimes they simply lived, unaware of the destiny that bound them all together. The archaeological record reveals the extraordinary ingenuity of this period. Around 300,000 years ago, wooden spears were crafted with precision. Stone tools became sharper, more specialized, and hunting strategies more organized. At Olorgesailie in Kenya, archaeologists discovered evidence of long-distance trade dating back 300,000 years. Obsidian transported dozens of kilometers to make cutting tools. This was not random wandering, it was networking, the earliest roots of exchange and cooperation that would one day define civilizations. And then, there was pigment. At sites in Africa, lumps of ochre were scraped and ground as early as 280,000 years ago. What was it for? Perhaps to tan hides, perhaps to mark bodies, perhaps to paint symbols we can no longer see. But in those pigments lies a secret, the stirrings of art, of symbolism, of a mind that saw meaning beyond survival. These were the first whispers of humanity's soul. Meanwhile, Neanderthals were pushing boundaries of their own. In caves across Europe, they built hearths, crafted tools from bone and antler, and hunted massive animals in organized groups. Cut marks on bones show that they processed hides for clothing, surviving brutal winters. And in some caves, evidence suggests they ventured into darkness to collect minerals, creating structures deep underground. Imagine Neanderthals carrying torches into pitch-black chambers, stacking stones in strange patterns, their minds reaching for something beyond utility. Even Denisovans, though little is known, left behind tools and ornaments that hint at advanced abilities. They were not shadows, they were full participants in the great drama of human evolution. But Africa remained the crucible. By 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens populations were spreading across the continent, diversifying in form and culture. Fossils from Omo Kibish in Ethiopia and Herto in the Rift Valley show clearly modern humans' faces you could pass on the street today. They lived by rivers, hunted antelope, gathered plants, and left behind stone tools sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. Their survival depended on adaptability, shifting diets, flexible social bonds, and the ability to innovate quickly when climates changed, and climates did change drastically. The Earth's cycles of ice and warmth created pulses of opportunity and danger. Droughts gripped Africa, shrinking lakes to mudflats. Then rains returned, greening deserts into savannas teeming with life. Each swing tested our ancestors. Many populations likely perished, but others adapted, moving into new niches, exploring new lands, carrying fire and memory with them. Perhaps the most profound shift of all was not in tools or trade, but in thought. By 150,000 years ago, signs of symbolic behavior emerge more clearly. Shell beads appear at sites like Blombo's cave in South Africa, carefully drilled and strung. These were ornaments, jewelry. Why wear them? Not for survival, but for identity, for belonging, for beauty. Here, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. We began to decorate ourselves, to tell stories not only with words but with symbols. Think of the power of that first necklace, that first streak of red ochre across skin. It was not just art, it was communication, status, ritual. It was humanity becoming aware of itself. And yet, as Homo sapiens developed in Africa, Neanderthals were doing the same in Europe. Recent discoveries suggest Neanderthals also used pigments, wore ornaments, and perhaps even painted in caves long before modern humans arrived. In Spain, red markings over 60,000 years old made before Homo sapiens ever entered Europe bear witness to Neanderthal creativity. The line between us and them blurs with every new discovery. Were they so different from us, or were they simply another reflection of what it means to be human? But as the timeline approaches 100,000 years ago, the stage is set for something unprecedented. Modern humans were preparing to leave Africa in waves that would reshape the world. The encounters with Neanderthals and Denisovans would soon follow, encounters written not only in bones and artifacts, but in the very fabric of our DNA. This was the prelude to contact, to conflict, to love, to interbreeding, to extinction. It was the moment before the storm, when humanity stood on the edge of its greatest journey. Let us pause and reflect. Between 300,000 and 100,000 years ago, our kind did not simply appear. We were forged by climate, by competition, by cooperation, and by imagination. We shared the earth with others who were like us, who laughed and wept and fought and dreamed. They are gone now, their voices silenced, but their blood runs in ours. Neanderthal genes shape our immune systems. Denisovan DNA lives on in the high-altitude lungs of Tibetan peoples. They are not lost, they are within us. The firelight of Jebel Urhode, the pigments of Blombos, the spears of Skinninginol. Of these are threads in the great tapestry of humanity, woven long before the first civilizations rose, long before history began to be written. This is not just science, it is a mirror. When we look into the past, we do not see strangers, we see ourselves, walking toward the future we now inhabit. This has been Stone Age Stories. In the next chapter, Part 5, we will cross the threshold of 100,000 years ago, when modern humans first stepped beyond Africa into the wider world. We will witness the great migrations, the first contact with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and the events that would decide who survived and who vanished. The story of humanity is not a straight line. It is a fire, passed from hand to hand, across countless generations. And as long as we remember, the fire will never go out. What does it mean to leave home, not just a village, not just a valley, but the very birthplace of humankind itself? For millions of years, life had unfolded across the vast continent of Africa. Here fire was mastered, tools were perfected, families grew and perished, and generations carried forward the fragile thread of survival. But by 100,000 years ago, something extraordinary was about to happen. Around 120,000 years ago, shifting climates transformed landscapes across Africa. Green corridors of rivers and lakes opened across what is now the Sahara Desert, beckoning hunters and families northward. Herds of gazelle, zebra, and antelope followed the rains, and humans followed the herds. Some reached the edges of the continent, standing where the Red Sea narrowed to a strait only a few kilometers wide. And then, for the first time, they crossed. Whether by rafts of bundled reeds or simply walking during times of lower sea levels, small groups of Homo sapiens entered the Arabian Peninsula. It was not yet a conquest of the world, just families seeking food and space, but it marked the first steps of a journey that would never stop. Evidence of this earliest wave survives in stone tools scattered across Arabia: sharp points, scrapers, and flakes, indistinguishable from those in Africa. These migrants left faint traces, their populations fragile, their hold on survival uncertain. Some groups may have perished in deserts when climates shifted again. Others retreated back to Africa, but the pattern was set. Humanity had begun to expand. Meanwhile, in Europe, Neanderthals reigned supreme. Their camps dotted valleys from Spain to Russia. They hunted mammoths, bison, and deer, moving with the seasons, building shelters of wood and hide. In the east, Denisovans occupied the mountains of Asia, leaving behind genes that would one day help their descendants thrive at high altitudes. When the first modern humans pushed northward into the Levant regions that are now Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, they encountered these other humans face to face. Archaeological sites like Skull and Kofsa caves preserve the bones of some of the earliest Homo sapiens outside Africa, dated to nearly 100,000 years ago. Or was it cautious curiosity, eyes meeting across firelight, children peeking from behind their mothers, men exchanging gestures? We may never know the details, but the evidence in our DNA tells us the truth. Contact did not end in conflict alone. It ended in unions. It ended in families. When modern humans and Neanderthals met, they interbred, their bloodlines merged, leaving behind traces that endure to this day. If you are of non-African ancestry, between 1% and 2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. In some populations of Asia and Oceania, Denisovan genes are also present, shaping immune systems, skin adaptations, and even the ability to live in the thin air of mountain plateaus. This was no simple migration, it was a weaving of destinies. As modern humans spread further, they carried with them not only genes but culture. By 80,000 years ago, groups in South Africa were carving geometric patterns into pieces of ochre, storing tools in organized caches. Where Neanderthals lived in bands of dozens, Homo sapiens began forming networks that stretched across valleys, linking hundreds, even thousands of people in webs of kinship and exchange. This ability to imagine, to believe, to cooperate with strangers through shared ideas was humanity's secret weapon. It would prove decisive in the struggles to come. By 70,000 years ago, a new wave of migration began, one far larger and more enduring than the first. By 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had reached Australia, adapting to deserts, rainforests, and strange beasts, unlike anything in Africa. Giant kangaroos, marsupial lions, enormous wombats, they faced them all, and they endured. Rock art in Arnhem Land may preserve stories stretching back tens of millennia, fragments of the oldest continuous culture on Earth. But even as humanity spread, shadows fell across other branches. Neanderthals held on in Europe, but pressure mounted as modern humans approached from the south. Denisovans faded into obscurity, their traces disappearing save for the DNA preserved in us. Other archaic humans, like the mysterious Homo floresiens Dini hobbits living on an Indonesian island, struggled against waves of newcomers. One by one they vanished. This was not always violent. Some were absorbed through interbreeding, their legacies woven into ours. Others may have succumbed to changing climates, diseases, or simple competition. But the pattern was clear. Homo sapiens were ascendant. We are their legacy, as much as our own. By 40,000 years ago, the map of humanity had changed forever. Modern humans stood on every continent except Antarctica. From the highlands of Tibet to the forests of Europe, from the deserts of Arabia to the coasts of Australia, we had become a planetary species. Our ancestors were no longer confined to Africa's cradle. The world itself was their home. The Great Migration was not a march of conquest, but a tide slow, patient, and relentless. It was the defining journey of our species. The path that would one day lead to cities, civilizations, and the modern world. This has been Stone Age Stories. In Part 6 we will follow the final chapters of prehistory, the rise of art and culture, the explosion of cave paintings and carvings, and the dawn of agriculture that would end the Stone Age and begin history as we know it. The fire of humanity has carried us across oceans, through deserts, into mountains, and across continents. And even now, it burns, as it always has, in the hearts of those who dare to journey into the unknown.